Well, good morning. Happy Monday. It is Monday, the 20th of October, 2025. We are almost at the end of October, and I hope you had a great weekend. I had a great weekend. I was working on a project that I've been kind of holding off for a long time. And so I didn't have any other things on the weekend that were demanding my attention. So I was able to work on it and get a good chunk of it done. And that's always a good feeling. It's a great thing. Anyway, and let's see what else. I think that's it is October. We got some big stuff coming up next weekend. We have trunk or treat on Saturday. The youth have a lock-in from Saturday to Sunday, and then Sunday of next week is a week ago. 6 days from now is a joint Reformation service of all the Lutheran churches in the Tucson area. And so that'll be interesting and fun to go to that. So yeah, I am just really kind of excited about this coming weekend. I know it's a lot of stuff, but it's always fun. It's always fun to jam pack some of these weekends. Also, today we have a special birthday, Betty Kyler. Happy birthday to you, Betty. I guess it's okay that once you're a centenarian that people know that, but she's 103 today. So happy birthday, Betty. May God richly bless your special day. And let's see, what else? I think we have some other birthdays that are fun this week, and so we'll get to those when they show up. I think that's about it. Thanksgiving is about a month away from this week, and can you believe we'll be and then after Thanksgiving is Christmas, and oh my goodness, it's just starting about now. It starts to get really, really busy in my world. So I don't know about you, but Thanksgiving, Christmas, it's all a blur every year. All right, let's get into our study. We are in Numbers chapter 6, and we're going to learn about something that you might find interesting. It's called the Nazirite Vow. Let's just start reading in verse 1. The Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, if a man or a woman wants to make a special vow, a vow of dedication to the Lord as a Nazirite, they must abstain from wine and other fermented drink, and must not drink vinegar made from wine or any other fermented drink. They must not drink grape juice or eat grapes or raisins. As long as they remain under their Nazirite vow, they must not eat anything that comes from the grapevine, not even the seeds or skins." So this is setting up something called a Nazirite vow. It's basically, Nazir means to set apart, or to be set apart. Anyway, like, who would do this? There are already people who are set apart for service to the Lord. That would be the Levites, the tribe of Aaron. But this would be for people who are not of the tribe of Aaron. They're not working in that. These are just people set apart. Now, this you can imagine that at some point everybody might want to say, for a period of time, and this you could do this for the rest of your life, or you could do it for a period of time. And I guess the period of time was normally about 30 days. And so you would take this vow, and then for the next 30 days, you're set apart. You'd proclaim to people, "I'm taking this vow," and then for the next 30 days, all the things listed here in Numbers, you would do that. And then at the end of the vow, you do something else. And well, let's just see what it is that you do, and then let's talk about it, because that might help us determine why a person might want to do this. Verse 5, During the entire period of the Nazirite vow, no razor may be used on their head. They must be holy until the period of the dedication to the Lord is over. They must let their hair grow long. Throughout the period of the dedication to the Lord, the Nazirite must not go near a dead body, even if their own father or mother or brother or sister dies. They must not make themselves ceremonially unclean on account of them, because the symbol of their dedication to God is on their head. Throughout the period of their dedication, they are to be consecrated to the Lord. If someone dies suddenly in the Nazirite's presence, thus defiling the hair that symbolizes their dedication, they must shave their head on the 7th day, the day of their cleansing. Then on the 8th day, they must bring 2 doves or 2 young pigeons to the priest at the entrance to the tent of meeting. The priest is to offer one as a sin offering and the other as a burnt offering, to make atonement for the Nazirite because they sinned by being in the presence of a dead body. That same day, they are to consecrate their head again. They must rededicate themselves to the Lord for the same period of dedication and must bring a year-old male lamb as a guilt offering. The previous days do not count because they become defiled during their period of dedication. Now, this is the law of the Nazirite when the period of their dedication is over. They are to be brought to the entrance to the tent of meeting. They are to present their offering to the Lord: a year-old male lamb without defect for burnt offering, a year-old ewe lamb without defect for sin offering, a ram without defect for the fellowship offering, together with the grain offering and a drink offering, and a basket of bread made with the finest flour and without yeast, thick loaves with olive oil mixed in, and thin loaves with the burnt olive oil, with brushed olive oil. The priest is to present all of these before the Lord and make the sin offering and the burnt offering. He is to present the basket of unleavened bread and is to sacrifice the ram as a fellowship offering to the Lord, together with the grain offering and the drink offering. And then at the entrance to the tent of meeting, the Nazirite must shave off their hair that symbolizes their dedication. They are to take the hair and put it in the fire that is under the sacrifice of the fellowship offering. And after the Nazirite has shaved off the hair that symbolizes their dedication, the priest is to place in their hands a boiled shoulder of the ram and 1 thick loaf and 1 thin loaf from the basket, both made without yeast. The priest shall then wave these before the Lord as a wave offering. They are holy and belong to the priest, together with the breast that was waved and the thigh that was presented. After that, the Nazirite may drink wine. This is the law of the Nazirite. This is the law of the Nazirite who vows offering to the Lord in accordance with their dedication. In addition to whatever else they can afford, they must fulfill the vows they had made according to the law of the Nazirite. So that's the whole section, number 6. There's more in number 6, but that's this Nazirite vow. So somebody would say, okay, I want to make a vow for a period of time. And during this period of time, there's 3 things you can't do. One is you can't touch a dead body. Second, you can't drink anything that is fermented. And you can't shave your head. Those are the 3 things you can't do. Now, when we think of people being set aside and dedicated to God, we think of typically like the monastic system where people would go into a monastery or go out into the wilderness or the desert. There is nothing in here that says that you can or cannot mingle with people. As a matter of fact, it's assumed that you'll mingle with people because you might be mingling with your family, and then somebody in your family might die, and then you have to start the whole process over again. So this is kind of like a monastic vow light, because in a monastic vow, you would go away into a monastery and you'd be set apart, not only physically, but detached from other people. You're very monastic. This, you can continue to work. The only 3 things that you can't do are shave your head, drink wine, or touch a dead body. And if either of those 3 things happen, like you are near a dead body accidentally, then you have to start the whole process over again. And apparently it was for about 30 days, although it could have been for a longer period of time. And you might want to ask yourself, why would somebody do this? And the answer is because there are times when a person might want to just rededicate make a sacrifice that they're intentional to God. Jesus went out into the wilderness for 40 days, and that was an intentional separation, but it was a time for him to focus on being with God. And there are people that fast for a day or 7 days or 30 days or 40 days. We had a guy in the congregation last Easter who fasted for all of Lent, didn't eat during Lent. And that is also kind of a separation. And all of these things are things that we do as a sacrifice. I've never done the Nazirite vow. But these are things that you could do as a sacrifice to say, over this next period of time, I'm going to be dedicating, and I want to show to the world that I'm dedicating myself to God and to this sacrifice. And there are people in history that have done this. We have in the Old Testament, Samson did this. He took the Nazirite vow. And if you'll remember, he cut his hair, and that caused all sorts of problems. Samson did that. Samuel did that. The Apostle Paul, it says that he didn't cut his hair, so it's assumed that it was the Nazirite vow. There have been others that taken the Nazirite vow. Now, do modern Jews take the Nazirite vow? And the answer is no, because at the end of the vow, that's all. The sacrifice during the vow is part A, but part B is you go to the temple, then you make all these sacrifices at the temple. And because there is no temple in Jerusalem right now, the Jews cannot take this vow and end the vow. Although apparently there have been people, Jews, that have taken the vow, but they have to do it permanently. I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to shave my hair. I'm not going to touch a dead body for my whole entire life. And then if they do accidentally touch a dead body, they start over again. But there's no end of the vow because there's no temple to do the sacrifices. And it's open to men and women. And women obviously wouldn't normally shave their head anyway. So this would be at the end of this vow where they shave their head. That could be interesting for women, but they might do it. I actually think that I know that hair is very important to women, and how it looks and how it's styled and whether it's big and fluffy or whatever. But I actually think that some women look really, really good bald. I've seen some women. I remember in Star Trek they had a Vulcan that she shaved her head, and I thought it was very attractive. But I think that all sorts of hairstyles, can look great. But anyway, this is the Nazirite vow, and it's a period of time where you're just set aside for God, and it's a form of sacrifice. It's a way for people who aren't priests to say, this is a time I'm dedicating to God, and there is never anything wrong for spending a period of time to dedicate your life to God. Now, our whole lives are dedicated to God. So is this anything different from that? And I think the answer is it's simply a more intentional way to dedicate your life. For example, let's say that you had something big in your life and you wanted to say, for the next 30 days, I'm going to dedicate my life because of that. That'd be fine. Or if you're intentionally praying for something, you want to focus on that time with God, you might do that also. I think, and the same is true with fasting, by the way. When you fast, you have extra time because you're not preparing or eating food or cleaning up for food. So you end up with a couple, 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes in the afternoon, an hour in the evening or whatever of extra time that you could say, okay, what am I going to do with that extra time? I'm going to spend time in prayer with God, or spend time intentionally with God. It could be almost anything. There's nothing wrong with this. And I think it's nothing wrong. Of course, there's nothing wrong. It's actually kind of a neat thing that you can, excuse me. It's kind of a neat thing that you could do to dedicate your life with God. Now, apparently, you could drink beer. It's only the fruit of the vine, so grapes, raisins, grape juice, anything that was kind of associated with the grape was not allowed. But apparently, things that were not grapes were allowed. Shaving the head, and apparently it's all facial hair. It's not just the head, but also, if you're a man, the beard and all that sort of thing too. And then afterwards, there's a whole series of sacrifices that you have to do at the temple. 2 turtle doves, a grain offering, bread offering. There's this wave offering, and there's this whole ceremony that the priest does at the end of the vow. And so it could be that, let's say you did something and it's not prescribed in one of the other priestly duties that we saw in Leviticus, but you wanted to spend a special time to God to dedicate yourself for a period of time. And maybe there's some guilt associated with it. You could take the Nazirite vow for a period of time. At the end of the vow, there's all these offerings. One of them is a guilt offering or a sin offering. And so this would be something that you would do. And it would just be a special time dedicated to God. Yeah. And apparently modern Jews don't do it because there is no temple. And so if you take the Nazirite vow as a modern Jew, you basically can never end the Nazirite vow, so don't do it. Unless they rebuild the temple in your lifetime, then you could apparently do that. But if they ever rebuilt the temple in your lifetime, there would be so many people going to the temple that it would be almost impossible to keep up with the number of people sacrificing at the temple. All right. They had beer back then. Well, sure, they had all sort of fermented things. Fermentation happens. They've fermented everything. I don't know if, beer is a modern day fermentation. It's interesting that in the one of the things they fermented was called honey, and that was called mead. But you can ferment wheat, you can ferment all sorts of things. And the thing is that during the time of the Reformation, the tax on a lot of these grain products by the Roman Empire was pretty high. And so the story goes that Martin Luther talked to his wife, Katie von Bora, and said, is there anything that we can ferment that isn't being taxed by the Roman government? And she said, well, yeah, but you wouldn't want to make anything out of it. It's barley and hops. And what good would that be? They're kind of a little bitter. And so Luther said, well, why don't you try just taking some of these grains and fermenting it and seeing what it tastes like? And so she experimented with a whole bunch of stuff, and it ended up with what we call modern day beer. Was actually an invention by her to ferment things that weren't being taxed by the Roman Empire. Now, I've done, I don't know, a year or two, 5 years ago, I did a little bit of a dive into this, and apparently there is some truth to it. But apparently there were other things that were being fermented at the time. It's only a certain, certain things, and I've never spent the time. I'm sure somebody's written an article or written a book about it, but that's the story that I heard, and I've just never spent any time researching it more than that. So, but so you hear every once in a while, you hear somebody say that Luther invented beer. Well, he didn't really invent the whole entire idea of fermenting grain products. That's been around for a very, very, very long time. But what he did invent was a new mixture of non-taxable grain products. And I think the two are barley and hops that are in modern day beers that give it its distinctive beer flavor. And so you end up in Germany with lots and lots and lots of beer, like lots of beer. And then you have Oktoberfests. So apparently at Oktoberfests, um, if you talk to some older Midwestern German Lutherans, every farmer would have their own recipe for beer, and so they would make their finest beer, and they would bring it to the Oktoberfest, and they would let everybody try their beers, and they would give awards for the best beer and that sort of thing. And I've heard stories of Oktoberfests in the Midwest from the early 1900s, where like everybody drank beer, all the adults, all the children. I mean, like it was just beer everywhere. And I don't know, if it's beer is not as alcoholic as wine, but if there's a lot of beer going around, you just never know, right? But yeah, so I've heard stories of young kids remembering the Oktoberfests, going and drinking all the beers. There's a guy named Paul who helped start the congregation. I remember talking to him about the Oktoberfests that he would go to as a kid. And anyway, that would have been early. That would have been the early 1900s. Yeah. Yeah. If we're in 2025 and you're 103, that means you were born in 1922. My goodness, 1922. That's almost my grandmother. She was born in 15. Yeah, it's crazy. All right. Anything else that we want to say about that? Well, it's just maybe a real quick tie-in. We don't have enough time to go into the Aaronic blessing. I think you don't have to abstain from wine or cut your hair. But I do believe that a modern day fast is also a sacrifice that is very, very beneficial. And I've done that many times. I've never done the Nazirite vow, but I have fasted. And one of the things that I find during a fast, your body switches over from carbohydrates over to lipids to fuel the brain. And during that switchover, there is a heightened brain activity, and I'm not entirely sure why that is. The science is there. I can't really explain it, because apparently there is a thing that's called grains for brains, which is very, very true. That if you really want to heighten your intellectual ability, then eat grains before that and let it saturate the brain, and your brain is very sharp. But it's also true that if you completely take carbohydrates out of your brain and you switch over to lipids, going into a process called ketosis, that and I've experienced this, where you just get a really incredible sharp intensity of brain activity, which is just really, really interesting. If you have to solve a problem, fasting is a great way to. I mean, obviously, one of the ways to do that is to eat lots of grains, but that can cause all sorts of physical problems. But taking away the grains and fasting for a while also heightens your brain activity. And so, if you've never fasted and you want to just try it, it is really it's a really great way to have a connection with God that I find very, very beneficial. And as I think about it, I'm thinking, when can I do a fast? Jennifer doesn't like it when I fast because she's like, have a donut, man. There's a period of time where it could be, you're craving grains and you're a little bit on edge. And the first few times I fasted, I was a little bit on edge. She's like, have a donut, man. But over time, I've learned to control that a little bit and only fast when she's out of town. When are you going out of town? All right. So, I think we'll leave it there. Taking the Nazirite vow was for men and women, and it was for people to connect with God in a very deep and personal way. And then at the end, you do this sacrifice, and that's also a cool way to connect with God. Nobody does that anymore. All right. So we'll leave it there. Let's close in prayer. Gracious God, thanks for this day. and watch over us until we meet again. In Jesus' name, amen. So all of you joining online, thank you so much. I hope you have a great day, the rest of the day. It's a great way to start our day in God's Word. And we will see you tomorrow. Take care. Bye.